Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the PokePopCast, COVID-19 edition. Hope everyone's doing well out there. Here, let me take this off. Oh, by the way, this mask was made for me by Doreen, known on the PokeGym forums as Pokemon SD. She put together a number of these. Very nice. Thank you, Doreen. So let me take this off so everyone can hear me better. All right, so welcome to the PokePopCast. As I said, we're here under quarantine. Hopefully, people will be able to get out soon, but not too soon. We want to make sure everyone stays safe. What I want to talk about today, real quick, was recently Organized Play did a major overhaul of the tournament guidelines, which I went over in the last podcast. But I wanted to focus on a few specific sections, and the first one I want to talk about here is Section 5.8.2.2, Judge Enforced Progression, or as I'm going to call it in this video, Judge Ball, because that is what it has commonly been called in the field. So first, just a little history on Judge Ball and what it is and what it was. This is new to being in the official published guidelines, but it's not new to Organized Play. Back around 2008, there was a popular deck, or popular enough anyway, a deck that was played that called Turbo Blissey, which basically had 4 Chanseys for the basics and 4 Blissies, and so it only had 4 basics, and it tended to have a lot of mulligans. And, you know, a few mulligans here and there isn't too much of an issue, but apparently there was one tournament where the mulligan resolution took about 20 minutes. And when you're talking about a 30-minute match, that's a problem, especially to the opponent, because now, through no fault of their own, the opponent has 10 minutes to win the match. And at that time, there weren't ties. If one player got ahead in prizes, they're winning the match. And as you can tell by the name, Turbo Blissey, it could take prizes fairly quickly. So it could get out ahead quickly, and the opponent didn't have time to bring back the game even or get ahead because there wasn't enough time. And that wasn't fair to them. They weren't allowed to play their game. So this was discussed quite a bit on the professor forums at that time. And if you're a professor, you should go to Pokemon.com, click on the professor link, and there is a link to the judge forums that are available to judges. Every professor should be on there and getting the information that's on there. These forums weren't the same, though, so the discussions that I'm talking about are no longer available. They did an upgrade, and those old forums got saved and are not available anymore. So this is based off of memory, and of course my memory, I'm not going to guarantee is 100% perfect, but this is to the best of my recollection and being able to look up a few references that I found online and different discussions. So like I said, this problem came up in 2008, and Organized Play responded to it by putting together what they called at the time Judge Ball, and they published this method of how to resolve these things on the professor forums. They did not publish it in official documents that were available to players at large, and I think that's because they didn't want to encourage players to play this system. But it had a negative side effect in that players weren't aware of it, and so when a judge would do it, it seemed like they were making it up, and that's not good. And the second thing is that the forums, as I said, had been retired, new forums created, and the old forums were not available, so the judges couldn't look to refer to how to do them properly, and so therefore there became some differences about how they were done. How much time did the mulligans take, or how many mulligans were taken, or when the card that was the Pokemon that was gotten to start, did they have to start with that, or were they able to have it in their hand and choose a different Pokemon if they got a different Pokemon to become their starter? So all these things became difficult to track, and as noted, the players weren't aware that this was a thing and it wasn't published. So basically, judges decided to not use it because it had these issues. And so that this is going on, became a bit of a controversy in 2011 when a few of these judge balls were done at tournaments, and players, like I said, weren't aware of it, and there were some discussions about it. And shortly after that, judges decided to stop using the judge ball. So that was almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago or so. So it was a bit of a surprise, a bit of a happy surprise to see the judge ball appear in the updated guidelines. And it looks to me like the guidelines as they're published now are the same that they were back then. I can't guarantee it because, as I said, those forums are not available to look at anymore, but they do appear to be the same things. Okay, so that's the history of it. Let's get into the details of how this is going to work. So first of all, most players and most judges will not need to use this or see this in a tournament. It is a fairly rare occurrence. If you look at the numbers, if you have a decent number of basics in your deck, this should come up as an issue about 1 in every 30,000 games. But statistics being what they are, it will come up occasionally. So it's good to be aware of. It's also good to be aware of that it should not be used. It should be used very, very sparingly. So one of the nice things in the guidelines is they talk about when do you actually use it. And so the first part of the guideline is that when a player has had 8 mulligans. After 8 mulligans, then the following process may be initiated. So even at that point, it's not mandatory, but you should definitely not even be thinking about it until you've come up to 8 mulligans. Now, one of the other things to be aware of is how timely are players resolving their mulligans. One thing that could be done before a judge ball or using the judge enforced progression is aiding a player in their shuffling. So if the opponent is called the judge over and said, hey, my opponent is taking a long time to resolve, he's doing extended shuffling, the judge can say to the player, speed up your shuffling. You don't need you don't get a 2-minute shuffle between each mulligan resolution. It's supposed to be 2 minutes total to get a basic Pokemon out. If in observing the player they're not shuffling to the judge's decision of how fast they should be doing, it is possible, and this is not part of these guidelines, this is me talking, it is possible for a judge to do the shuffling for the player themselves. Since the judge is doing their shuffling, there's no concern about cheating in the shuffling because the judge is not trying to stack the deck for the player. Therefore, there doesn't need to be a cut. Note, anytime a judge shuffles, the opponent doesn't get the cut because the judge is not going to cheat for the other player. The judge, therefore, they can do the shuffling quicker without there being any concern of stacking. So you can do quick shuffles, select 7 cards, check for a Pokemon, do a quick shuffle, and so forth, much faster than a player might do it. So that's one way to speed things up. If they're playing a really low count for some reason, they're playing, or for some reason it's just taking a long time still, once you hit 8 mulligans, you can use this judge enforced progression or judge ball. And the method to do it is fairly simple. It's really nice having it written here in the guidelines, so anytime you're going to do this, don't rely on your memory. Check out the guidelines, make sure you're following the guidelines. So number 1, you've shuffled the player's deck. You're going to start doing revealing cards from the top of the player's deck. And reveal means you're flipping them over. The opponent gets to see them. Now, some players may be concerned, well, hey, you're showing all my deck to my opponent. If you think about it statistically, they've seen in 8 mulligans, they've seen 56 cards. So that's most of your deck already. So after revealing, you're going to eventually come across a basic Pokemon. That basic Pokemon gets put on the side face down. It does not have to be the active starting Pokemon. Then the deck gets shuffled once more, so all those revealed cards get shuffled back in. The player now draws 6 more cards, and those 6 more cards plus the one Pokemon that was revealed and selected before is now their starting hand. They have at least one basic Pokemon in there. They will choose either that or a different Pokemon from that hand, if they happen to get one, to be their starting Pokemon. And then this game starts. Now, the last thing you're doing is you're giving a time extension for the time that it took to resolve the issue once the judge was called. Okay? And that's it. It should not come up very often at all. When it does come up, it makes sure that the opponent has not gotten a truncated amount of time to play their game. So that's fair. One last thing I'll suggest in here, it notes the 8 mulligans completed without drawing a basic, that it may occur at that time. I would suggest to ask the opponent if they wish to continue drawing mulligan cards. Some players may wish to just keep going and get a big hand. Now, remember, they're not drawing their mulligan cards until after the opponent sets up, so they're not drawing one card each time, getting a mulligan, draw a card, get a mulligan. That's not happening. So they're going to have to determine, gee, how many cards do I want to get into my hand, potentially, which could potentially cause a problem by having too many cards, not the deck not large enough. So if the opponent wishes to continue racking up mulligan draws, I would allow it. They're going to have to draw as many cards as they declare. So if they're going to, if they're going to declare a lower number than the number of mulligans that have been done, then we really should be using this to get the game going. But if they, for some reason, want to get a huge hand, maybe they're playing the unknown deck that wins when it has X number of cards in their hand. Who knows? They're certainly within their rights to keep drawing cards if they want to, if the other player is continuing to mulligan. So that's just something to consider. Get both players' consent on getting the game started, or certainly the opponent's consent, because they're the ones who's being negatively affected by this ongoing mulligan situation. All right, that's about it. Stay safe, and we hope to see you at events soon. Take care.